The year was 1883, and the Arizona Territory held secrets older than the ancient pines. Sarah Blackwood lived on the edge of two worlds, her father's trading post and the vast Apache lands beyond. She carried her grandmother's knowledge of herbs and healing in a small leather pouch, never expecting it would change her destiny. When the Apache scout they called Iron Eagle appeared at dawn with a broken arrow and dark eyes that mirrored the endless sky, something stirred in the quiet places of her heart. Neither could have known that a simple mending would bind their fates to the mountain's most sacred treasure. What power did the hidden spring truly hold, and why were men willing to kill for it? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn light spilled across the weathered porch of Blackwood Trading Post as Sarah swept away yesterday's dust. The morning ritual marked the beginning of another day, balanced between worlds, the settled and the wild, the white man's commerce and the Apache way. At 32, Sarah had long ago accepted this life of in-betweens. "Riders coming," her father called from inside, his voice carrying the gravel of too many years breathing desert air. Thomas Blackwood emerged, squinting toward the eastern trail. At 65, he stood straight as a lodgepole pine, his silver beard neatly trimmed against leathered skin. The Winchester in his hands wasn't a threat, merely a reminder that courtesy in the territories came with conditions. Army scouts, Sarah noted, recognizing the dust pattern of military mounts. Thomas grunted. That Fletcher fellow's probably with them. Sarah's shoulders tightened. Harlan Fletcher had appeared 3 months ago, representing the Arizona Copper and Silver Company. With smooth words and shark's eyes, every visit brought more questions about water sources in the high country, Apache country. The riders materialized from the heat shimmer, 4 soldiers escorting a man in an eastern suit too formal for frontier life. Fletcher removed his hat as they approached, revealing slick-backed hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. "Miss Blackwood, a pleasure as always." Fletcher's gaze lingered uncomfortably. Sarah nodded curtly, one hand unconsciously touching the medicine pouch at her waist. Inside lay her grandmother's treasures, seeds, herbs, and wisdom from a woman of 2 bloods. Elizabeth Blackwood had been half Apache, though few knew it. She'd passed 7 years ago, leaving Sarah a legacy of healing knowledge that bridged divided worlds. "Mr. Blackwood," Fletcher addressed her father, "I've brought a new map. Perhaps you might mark the reliable water sources in the northern ridges." Thomas crossed his arms. "Those ridges are Apache hunting grounds, Mr. Fletcher. Not my business to map." "The Army disagrees," Fletcher replied smoothly. "Lieutenant Carson here has orders to survey all water sources for the new fort placement." The young lieutenant looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we're only mapping public lands." "All lands are public now," Fletcher corrected with practiced patience. "The Apache reservation boundaries were adjusted last month." Sarah's stomach tightened. No one had informed the local bands of such changes. Typical government tactics. As the men argued territory politics, movement caught Sarah's eye, a solitary figure on the ridge above the trading post, watching. Even at this distance, she recognized Iron Eagle. 3 days ago, he'd appeared at first light with a broken arrow and few words. She'd mended it with sinew and pine resin, working silently beside him as the sun climbed. He'd taken the repaired arrow with a nod that contained more gratitude than most men's elaborate thanks. Something in his dark eyes had stirred memories of her grandmother's stories, tales of mountain spirits and sacred waters. Now he watched the soldiers like a hawk studies field mice. "Miss Blackwood," Sarah startled. Fletcher stood too close, smelling of bay rum and ambition. "I understand you gather medicinal plants in the highlands. Perhaps you've noticed unusual water sources, springs with distinctive properties." "Desert plants need little water, Mr. Fletcher. I follow dry washes mostly." The lie came easily. Her grandmother had taught her that some knowledge wasn't meant for men who saw the earth as something to be claimed rather than respected. Fletcher's smile thinned. "The company pays well for useful information, Miss Blackwood." "We manage fine," Thomas interrupted. "Now, did you come to trade or just to talk?" As Fletcher turned away, Sarah glanced back to the ridge. Iron Eagle had vanished, but something told her he hadn't gone far. The broken arrow he'd brought bore markings of a scout on important business. Whatever brought him to these mountains, it wasn't random chance. That night, Sarah dreamed of cool water flowing from stone and a broken arrow made whole again. 3 days later, Sarah ventured into the foothills alone. Her saddlebags held empty canvas pouches for harvesting, her grandmother's worn journal, and a small revolver Thomas insisted she carry. The pistol was a reluctant concession to her father's worry. Sarah preferred to trust her knowledge of the land and its creatures over cold metal. The summer heat hadn't yet reached its punishing peak this early in the morning. Sarah guided her mare higher along a narrow game trail, breathing in the changing scents as desert scrub gave way to juniper and piñon pine. Here, in the transition zone between worlds, her grandmother had taught her the most powerful medicines. "Grew. Look for plants that survive where others cannot," Elizabeth had said. "They hold the strongest medicine." Sarah dismounted at a small meadow ringed by weathered stones. Generations of Apache women had harvested here, leaving no trace except knowledge passed from mother to daughter. Sarah's fingers traced the smooth surface of a boulder where grinding depressions had been worn over centuries. She worked methodically, gathering early summer herbs while murmuring thanks in the mixture of Apache and English her grandmother had taught her. The familiar rhythm of the work almost made her miss the sensation of being watched. Almost, but not quite. Sarah straightened slowly, keeping her movements casual. Years on the frontier had taught her the value of patience. She scanned the ridge. Above, where twisted junipers provided perfect concealment. "I know you're there," she called, her voice steady. Silence answered, but the quality of it had changed. Sarah reached for her saddlebag, not for the revolver, but for the mended arrow she'd placed there this morning. Some instinct had told her to bring it. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, holding up the arrow. Iron Eagle emerged from the shadows like he'd materialized from the rock itself. He wore buckskin leggings and a cotton shirt, with a bandolier of cartridges across his chest. A Winchester repeating rifle, similar to the one her father carried, rested comfortably in his hands. "You travel alone." His English carried the musical cadence of his native tongue. "Not wise. I've been coming to these mountains since I was a girl." Sarah kept her voice matter-of-fact. "The plants I need don't grow in safe places." Iron Eagle moved down the slope with the balanced grace of a mountain lion. His face remained impassive, but Sarah sensed he was measuring her, weighing something in his mind. "The arrow flies true now," he said, taking it from her outstretched hand. "Strong medicine in your fingers." "My grandmother taught me, the one with Apache blood." It wasn't a question. Sarah's surprise must have shown on her face, because Iron Eagle's expression softened slightly. Old Joseph spoke of her before he died, said she understood the old ways, though her skin was pale. "You knew my grandfather?" Sarah hadn't expected this connection. Iron Eagle nodded once. "He was scout when my father was young warrior. He married woman of two worlds." His dark eyes studied her face. "You have her spirit." Before Sarah could respond, a harsh scream echoed across the meadow. They both turned as a tawny shape launched from a nearby ledge. Mountain lion and a large one. Iron Eagle raised his rifle in one fluid motion, but Sarah caught his arm. "Wait!" The big cat landed 20 yards away, its tawny coat gleaming in the morning light. It wasn't charging, but pacing nervously, making strange half growls. "Something's wrong," Sarah murmured. Iron Eagle lowered his rifle slightly, but remained tensed. "It hunts us." "No," Sarah said with sudden certainty. "It's asking for help." She took a slow step forward. The mountain lion growled, but backed up, then moved a few paces away before looking over its shoulder. "It wants us to follow," Sarah whispered. "Iron," Eagle's expression showed doubt, but he didn't stop her as she began walking carefully after the retreating cat. "Your grandmother's spirit is very strong in you," he said quietly, falling into step beside her. "Perhaps too strong for your own safety." The mountain lion led them higher, pausing occasionally to ensure they followed. Sarah moved with careful determination, while Iron Eagle shadowed her steps, rifle ready. After 20 minutes of climbing, the cat disappeared around a stone outcropping. "We should turn back," Iron Eagle warned. "Mountain spirits sometimes take this form to test warriors." Sarah hesitated. "My grandmother spoke of such things, but I never thought—" She left the sentence unfinished and continued forward. Beyond the rocks, they discovered a narrow ravine. The mountain lion crouched beside a smaller form, a half-grown cub, its hind leg trapped beneath a fallen branch. The mother growled softly as they approached, but didn't charge. "She knows we can help," Sarah whispered. Iron Eagle's expression remained skeptical, but he nodded. "I will distract the mother. You free the cub." Working together with unspoken coordination, they managed the rescue. Sarah lifted the branch while Iron Eagle kept the mother's attention. The cub scrambled free, limping but alive. The mother lion gathered her offspring with gentle jaws and retreated, turning once to fix Sarah with an amber gaze that seemed to hold more than animal awareness. "You have strong medicine," Iron Eagle said after the cats disappeared. "Animals do not seek help from people. My grandmother said all living things understand kindness." Sarah brushed dust from her skirt, suddenly aware of how far they'd come from the meadow. The trading post lay invisible beyond several ridgelines. Iron Eagle studied her with new interest. From inside his shirt, he withdrew a small leather pouch, similar to Sarah's own. Opening it, he removed a worn piece of deerskin covered with faded markings, a map unlike any Sarah had seen. No straight lines or measured distances, but a flowing pattern of symbols. "This place," he said, pointing to a mark near where they stood. "It is sacred to my people. Few outsiders have seen it." He hesitated, then added, "Your grandmother was one." Sarah's heart quickened. She never spoke of any sacred place. "She kept our secrets." Iron Eagle's voice held approval. "But now men come searching. Men like the one at your trading post." "Fletcher?" Iron Eagle nodded grimly. 4 days ago, his men were in these mountains with digging tools. They search for something they do not understand. "What are they looking for?" Sarah asked. Instead of answering, Iron Eagle touched a silver pendant hanging from a leather cord around his neck. "This was given to me when I became guardian. It belonged to the guardian before me, and many before him." The pendant caught the sunlight, a small hammered silver disc with intricate symbols that reminded Sarah of flowing water and mountain. "In peaks, there is a place I must show you," he said finally. "A place your grandmother knew, but first you must decide." "Decide what?" "If you are ready to carry the burden she once refused." Sarah's thoughts spun. What burden? What hadn't her grandmother told her? Before she could question further, Iron Eagle gestured toward the west. "Night comes soon. We must reach shelter." His tone allowed no argument. "Tomorrow, if you choose, I will take you to the sacred place." They made camp in a sheltered overhang as twilight painted the desert below in deepening purples. Iron Eagle built a small, nearly smokeless fire, while Sarah prepared a simple meal from her saddlebags. They ate in companionable silence until Sarah could contain her questions no longer. "My grandmother, what burden did she refuse?" Iron Eagle's eyes reflected the firelight. "To be keeper of the spring." He touched the silver pendant again. "To walk between worlds as guardian of what lies hidden in these mountains." "And you think I should take this burden?" "The mountain lion came to you, not me," he said simply. "The spirits have already chosen." Morning arrived with pearl-grey light and the distant cry of an eagle. Sarah woke to find Iron Eagle already alert, watching the eastern horizon with practiced vigilance. "We should return to your trading post," he said when he noticed her stirring. "Your father will worry." Sarah shook her head. I often stay in the mountains overnight when gathering. He knows I'm capable. She straightened her clothing and rebraided her hair with efficient movements. You offered to show me a sacred place. I want to see it. Iron Eagle studied her face, seeming to search for something. Whatever he sought, he appeared to find it, for he nodded once. It is half a day's journey, difficult terrain. I'm stronger than I look, Sarah replied. They traveled higher into the mountains, following game trails that sometimes disappeared altogether. Iron Eagle moved with the confidence of one who had walked these paths many times, occasionally pointing out signs invisible to untrained eyes, a bent twig, disturbed pebbles, the faint impression of a moccasin. Tracks from 3 days ago, he explained at one point. Apache scouts watching the white men's movements. By midday they had reached a high saddle between twin peaks. Iron Eagle paused, surveying the vast landscape below. To the east lay the trading post, barely visible as a speck in the desert expanse. To the west, rugged canyons cut deep into the earth. Beyond those canyons, Iron Eagle said, my people have hidden from soldiers for many seasons. Few white men know these paths. Yet Fletcher's men are searching here, Sarah observed. Iron Eagle's expression darkened. They have a map, an old one, but dangerous in their hands. They descended into a narrow canyon where the temperature dropped noticeably. Water had carved the passage over countless centuries, leaving smooth, undulating walls that sometimes narrowed to barely a shoulder's width. In these confines, Sarah became acutely aware of Iron Eagle's physical presence, his measured breathing, the subtle scent of sage and smoke that clung to his clothing. The canyon finally opened into a hidden valley cupped by towering cliffs. Ancient dwellings had been carved into the red stone walls, abandoned centuries before by people whose names were lost to time. The ancient ones lived here, Iron Eagle explained, before my people, before yours. In the center of the valley stood a circle of standing stones, surrounding a pool of water, so still it mirrored the sky like polished silver. Steam rose gently from its surface, despite the day's warmth. The sacred spring, Iron Eagle said softly. Sarah approached slowly, drawn by something she couldn't name. The water held an otherworldly clarity, revealing depths that seemed to extend impossibly far below. It never dries, Iron Eagle continued, even in the worst drought. And it heals. Sarah knelt beside the pool. May I? Iron Eagle nodded. She dipped her fingers into the water. It felt neither hot nor cold, but somehow both at once, tingling against her skin. Acting on instinct, Sarah removed a small clay jar from her gathering bag and carefully filled it. Iron Eagle watched without comment, though his eyes betrayed surprise at her boldness. My grandmother would have wanted to study its properties, Sarah explained, securing the jar in her bag. Your grandmother knew its power, Iron Eagle replied. She helped the previous guardian protect it from soldiers during the last great conflict. Sarah stared at him. She never spoke of this. Some burdens are too heavy to share. Iron Eagle gestured to the cavern dwellings. Come, there is more you should see. Inside the largest dwelling, faded paintings covered the walls, spiraling. Patterns, handprints, and figures that seemed to dance between worlds. Among them, one image stood out, a woman with pale skin holding what appeared to be the same silver pendant Iron Eagle wore. The first keeper from the outside world. Iron Eagle explained, from long ago, the spring chooses who will guard it. Sarah traced the ancient image with trembling fingers. And you believe it's chosen me? I believe you must decide if you are willing to be chosen, he answered. The path of the keeper is not easy. It means walking between worlds, belonging fully to neither. I've been doing that my entire life, Sarah said softly. They returned to the trading post as sunset painted the desert in gold and crimson. Sarah's father stood on the porch, Winchester cradled in his arms, worry etched on his weathered face. His expression shifted from relief to suspicion when he spotted Iron Eagle. 2 nights, Sarah, not like you. Thomas Blackwood's eyes never left Iron Eagle. "The plants I needed grow higher up," Sarah explained, dismounting. "Iron Eagle guided me safely back." Thomas nodded curtly to the Apache. "My thanks." Iron Eagle returned the gesture with equal reserve. "Your daughter has strong medicine. Like her grandmother." Something passed between the men, recognition of a shared history Sarah couldn't quite decipher. "Fletcher's been back," Thomas said, turning to Sarah. "Asking about you." "What did he want?" "Where you go in the mountains." "What?" "You gather," Thomas frowned. "Said the army needs a guide who knows the high country. Offered good money." Sarah exchanged a glance with Iron Eagle. "I'm not interested." Told him as much. Thomas gestured toward the trading post. "Come eat. Your Apache friend too, if he's hungry." The invitation surprised both Sarah and Iron Eagle. Her father rarely welcomed Apache visitors after sundown, regardless of the peace between them. The meal passed in silence until Thomas finally spoke. "You found the spring, didn't you?" Sarah's spoon clattered against her bowl. "You knew about it? Your grandmother showed me once, made me swear never to speak of it." Thomas studied Iron Eagle. "You're its guardian now." Iron Eagle nodded. "As my father was before me." Thomas sighed heavily. "Elizabeth said men would come for it someday. Seems that day has arrived." "Fletcher?" Sarah asked. "His company found old Spanish records. Maps." Thomas rubbed his beard. "They believe the spring water contains something valuable." "It contains medicine," Iron Eagle said firmly. "Sacred power, not for mining or selling." Thomas nodded. Elizabeth felt the same. After the meal, Iron Eagle prepared to leave, but not before pressing something into Sarah's palm, a single eagle feather, its shaft wrapped with sinew and adorned with a tiny silver bead. "For the keeper's ceremony," he explained quietly. "I will return in 3 days' time." After he departed, Sarah found her father on the porch, pipe smoke curling around him in the evening stillness. "Why didn't you tell me about grandmother and the spring?" she asked. Thomas exhaled slowly. "She made me promise, said the knowledge was a burden that should die with her, but she taught me her medicines, her ways." "Not all of them." Thomas tapped his pipe against the railing. "The spring changed her, Sarah, gave her abilities that frightened even her sometimes. She chose to walk away from it, chose a normal life with me instead. And now Iron Eagle thinks I'm meant to be its next keeper." Thomas studied her face in the fading light. "Are you?" Sarah fingered the eagle feather. "I don't know yet, but I need to find out." The next morning, Sarah examined the spring water by first light. The clear liquid shimmered oddly in its clay jar, catching sunlight in ways ordinary water wouldn't. A drop on her skin left a tingling sensation that lasted for minutes. When Thomas left to hunt, Sarah carefully mixed the spring water with different medicinal herbs from her grandmother's collection. The results were startling. Infusions that normally took days to prepare activated immediately, glowing with subtle luminescence. Sarah worked through the day, documenting each experiment in her journal. She barely noticed the passage of time until Thomas returned with a haunch of venison and news. Army patrol spotted smoke signals in the high country, Apache bands gathering. His expression was grim. Something stirring them up, Sarah thought, of Fletcher's men searching the mountains. They're protecting their sacred places. Maybe. Thomas hung his rifle on its pegs. But the army won't see it that way. There's talk of sending a larger force to pacify the region. That night, Sarah dreamed of the spring. In her dream, she stood within the circle of stones as the water rose around her, not drowning, but embracing. She awoke with the eagle feather, clutched in her hand, and the certain knowledge that she had already made her choice. 3 days passed in a flurry of activity at the trading post. Army patrols increased, stopping to water their horses, and pressed Thomas for information about Apache movements. Sarah kept to her work, avoiding questions while listening carefully to every scrap of news. On the morning Iron Eagle was due to return, a military detachment arrived. Their commander, Lieutenant James Caldwell, appeared barely 30, young for his rank, with intelligent eyes that missed little. "Mr. Blackwood," he greeted Thomas formally. "We've been ordered to establish a temporary outpost in this vicinity." Thomas frowned. "Trouble expected, Lieutenant? Precautionary measures only." Caldwell removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked hair and a face more accustomed to smiling than frowning. "May we speak privately?" Inside the trading post, Sarah served coffee while studying the document Caldwell placed on the table. An official order authorizing searches for rebel Apache hideouts in the mountains. "This is Apache hunting territory," Thomas said. "Has been for generations." "I'm aware, sir," Caldwell replied. "But I have my orders." He glanced at Sarah. "I understand your daughter knows these mountains well." Before Thomas could respond, the trading post door swung open. Harlan Fletcher entered, followed by two rough-looking men carrying surveying equipment. "Lieutenant, I see you've begun discussions." Fletcher smiled thinly at Sarah. "Miss Blackwood, a pleasure as always." Sarah nodded stiffly, noticing how Caldwell's posture subtly changed, becoming more formal, less comfortable. "Mr. Fletcher is acting as civilian consultant regarding water sources," Caldwell explained, though his tone suggested the arrangement wasn't his preference. Fletcher spread a map across the table, covering Caldwell's military order. "We've identified several promising locations for the new fort," he said, "but water remains the critical factor." His finger traced a route into the mountains, dangerously close to the hidden valley. Native legends speak of a spring that never runs dry, even in the worst drought, exactly what a permanent military installation would require. Sarah's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Those are just stories." Fletcher's eyes narrowed slightly. "Perhaps. But the Spanish recorded similar accounts. One report mentions water with unusual properties, healing properties." "Superstition," Thomas interjected. "Science suggests otherwise." Fletcher withdrew a small vial of liquid. "We found traces of unusual mineral content in a creek bed. Analysis indicates it contains rare earth elements, quite valuable in eastern markets." Caldwell shifted uncomfortably. "My orders concern security, Mr. Fletcher, not mining prospects." "The government's interests and the company's align perfectly," Fletcher assured him smoothly. "You need water for your fort. We need access to mineral resources. The Apache need to be contained for everyone's safety." The conversation continued, but Sarah slipped away, her mind racing. Outside, she busied herself with chores while scanning the ridgeline. No sign of Iron Eagle, but he wouldn't approach with soldiers present. Later, when the military party departed to establish their camp a mile downriver, Thomas found Sarah in her garden. "Fletcher's dangerous," he said without preamble. "That young Lieutenant may follow orders, but he seems decent enough. Fletcher, though," he shook his head, "he wants something more than minerals or water." "He wants power," Sarah replied, thinking of the spring's strange properties. "And he doesn't care who suffers for it." That night, a soft scratching at her window woke Sarah from restless sleep. Iron Eagle's silhouette was barely visible against the starlit sky. "They have established a perimeter of soldiers," he whispered when she opened the window. "But there are paths they do not know." Fletcher's. Getting closer to finding the spring, Iron Eagle's expression remained impassive, but Sarah sensed his concern. "The ceremony cannot wait. You must decide now." "I've already decided." Sarah gathered her shawl. "Let me leave a note for my father." She wrote quickly by lamplight. "Gone. To complete what grandmother began. Don't worry, trust me." Iron Eagle led her through the darkness, avoiding the army camp with practiced ease. As they climbed toward the distant mountains, Sarah glanced back at the trading post, a lone light in the vast darkness, the only home she'd ever known. "Your father was a good husband to your grandmother," Iron Eagle said unexpectedly. "He respected her ways, though he did not understand them." "He's afraid for me," Sarah replied, "as he was for her." "With reason." Iron Eagle paused. The path of the keeper is not easy. It requires sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Iron Eagle's eyes reflected. Starlight. That is different for each keeper. The mountain spirits will show you. They traveled through the night, following paths invisible to untrained eyes. Iron Eagle moved with confident silence, occasionally touching Sarah's arm to guide her through particularly treacherous terrain. By dawn, they had reached a high ridge, overlooking the sacred valley, now shrouded in morning mist. "We will not go directly to the spring," Iron Eagle explained, leading her along the ridgeline. "First, you must be prepared." He brought her to a small cave hidden behind a stand of junipers. Inside, a fire pit contained the ashes of previous ceremonies, and simple pictographs adorned the walls, similar to those in the ancient dwellings, but fresher. "This is where guardians have prepared for generations," Iron Eagle said. From a hidden niche, he removed a bundle wrapped in deerskin. Unwrapped, it revealed an ornately carved bow, smaller than a hunting bow, its surface covered with symbols similar to those around the spring. "The ceremonial bow," Iron Eagle explained. "It belonged to the first keeper, who was of my people. It has been carried by each guardian since." He demonstrated how to hold it, not as a weapon, but as a ceremonial object. The bow represents the connection between earth and sky, between the seen and unseen worlds. Sarah took it carefully, feeling an unexpected warmth in the ancient wood. "It's beautiful." "It is powerful," Iron Eagle corrected. "When a true keeper holds it, the mountain spirits listen." He instructed her to wash in a small basin of water brought from the spring, then to change into a simple buckskin dress he provided. "Your grandmother wore this during her time with the spring," he explained. "The dress fit as if made for her." Sarah ran her fingers over the intricate beadwork along the hem, patterns that echoed the symbols on the cave walls. "Now we wait," Iron Eagle said, settling cross-legged near the cave entrance. "The ceremony must begin at midday, when the sun stands directly above the spring. In the hours before noon, Iron Eagle taught Sarah the first sacred songs, melodies that seemed to resonate with the mountain itself. She practiced handling the ceremonial bow, learning how to trace specific patterns in the air that corresponded to the ancient symbols. "The bow does not shoot arrows of wood," Iron Eagle explained. "It channels the keeper's intentions, sending them into the heart of the mountain." As midday approached, they heard an unexpected sound, voices echoing up. From below, Iron Eagle moved to the cave entrance, his expression darkening. "Fletcher's men," he said grimly. "They have found the outer path to the valley." Sarah joined him at the entrance. Below, she could make out several figures picking their way along a narrow trail. Fletcher at the lead, followed by two rough-looking men carrying equipment. No military escort was visible. "They must not reach the spring before the ceremony is complete," Iron Eagle said. "Once you are recognized as keeper, you can help protect it." "How do we stop them?" Iron Eagle considered. "We must delay them without revealing ourselves." He pointed to a section of trail, passing beneath an unstable rock formation. "There, the guardian bow has more than ceremonial uses." He retrieved his own hunting bow and a single arrow. With practiced precision, he aimed not at the men, but at a specific point where the trail narrowed beside a precarious stack of boulders. The arrow struck true, causing a small shower of rocks to cascade across the path. From their hidden vantage point, they watched Fletcher's party halt, forced to find an alternate route that would cost them precious time. "It will not stop them for long," Iron Eagle warned. They hurried down to the spring by a different path, arriving just as the sun reached its zenith. The circle of standing stones cast no shadows, and the spring's surface seemed to glow with inner light. Iron Eagle began preparations, arranging sacred objects around the spring's edge: an eagle feather, a piece of turquoise, a small bundle of sage, and finally the ceremonial bow. "Stand here," he instructed Sarah, positioning her at the spring's edge. "When I begin the guardian song, you must step into the water holding the bow." Sarah's heart pounded. What will happen if the Spring accepts you, you will know what to do. Iron Eagle's usually stoic expression softened slightly. Your grandmother stood in this same place once. The spring called to her, but she chose another path. And if the spring rejects me, Iron Eagle's silence was answer enough. Iron Eagle began to sing, his deep voice echoing against the canyon walls. The melody seemed to vibrate through the stones themselves, causing ripples across the spring's surface. Sarah gripped the ceremonial bow, her fingers finding natural positions on the ancient wood, as if guided by unseen hands. With deliberate steps, she entered the spring. The water felt strangely warm, embracing rather than engulfing. As she reached the center, standing waist-deep, the bow in her hands began to glow with subtle blue light. Iron Eagle's song intensified. Sarah felt a presence surrounding her, not threatening but evaluating. Images flashed through her mind, her grandmother as a young woman standing in this same spring, generations of Apache guardians keeping watch, ancient peoples drinking from these waters. Then came a jolting vision of Fletcher's men drilling into the sacred ground, draining the spring into steel containers, leaving the valley dead and barren. "No!" Sarah whispered, and the bow pulsed in response. Suddenly, the water began to swirl around her, forming a gentle vortex. Sarah raised the bow instinctively, tracing patterns in the air as Iron Eagle had taught her. With each movement, the iron water responded, rising in delicate arcs before settling again. A profound sense of connection flowed through her, to the mountain, the water, the ancient guardians, and to Iron Eagle himself, whose song now seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then, as quickly as it began, the phenomenon subsided. The spring returned to stillness, though Sarah could still feel something pulsing beneath the surface, like a heartbeat synchronizing with her own. When she emerged from the water, she was completely dry. Iron Eagle stood at the edge, his expression one of rare amazement. "The spring has accepted you," he said simply. "You are keeper now." He removed the silver pendant from his neck and placed it around hers. The metal felt warm against her skin, humming with subtle energy. "The spring will teach you what you need to know," Iron Eagle continued. "I will guide you, but the deepest wisdom comes from the water itself." A distant sound interrupted them. Voices approaching from the trail. Fletcher's men had found an alternate route sooner than expected. "We must leave," Iron Eagle said urgently. "You are not yet ready to defend the spring." They retreated to the ancient dwellings, watching from shadow as Fletcher and his men entered the valley. One carried a bulky camera, another various scientific instruments. Fletcher himself moved with the confidence of a man accustomed to taking what he wanted. "Remarkable," they heard him say as he approached the spring. The Spanish accounts were accurate. He directed his men to collect water samples and photograph the site. When one attempted to remove one of the standing stones for examination, Sarah felt a surge of protective rage. Without conscious thought, she raised her hand toward the spring. The water's surface began to churn, startling Fletcher's men. A swirling mist rose, obscuring their view and dampening their equipment. "What the devil?" Fletcher exclaimed as his photographer's flash powder refused to ignite. Iron Eagle gripped Sarah's arm. "How did you do that?" he whispered. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "I just wanted to protect it." They watched as Fletcher's frustrated party eventually gathered their malfunctioning equipment and departed, cursing the sudden change in conditions. When they were gone, Iron Eagle studied Sarah with new respect. "The spring's power flows through you already, faster than I have seen with any guardian." That evening, as they made camp in one of the ancient dwellings, Iron Eagle presented Sarah with a small deerskin package. "This belongs to you now," he said. Inside was a journal bound in faded leather, its pages filled with familiar handwriting, her grandmother's. "She left this with my father," Iron Eagle explained, "to be given to the next keeper if one came from her bloodline." Sarah opened it with trembling fingers. The first page bore a simple inscription: "For my granddaughter Sarah, if the spring calls to her as it once called to me. May you find the strength I lacked. The journal contained detailed accounts of her grandmother's experiences with the spring, knowledge passed down through generations of keepers, and warnings about those who might seek to exploit its power. Why did she refuse? Sarah asked, looking up from the pages. Why didn't she become keeper? Iron Eagle's expression softened. She chose love. Your grandfather, your father. The spring demands devotion that leaves little room for other bonds. Sarah thought of the trading post, her father waiting for her return. Then I must choose as well. You already have, Iron Eagle said quietly. The spring has accepted you, but how you serve as keeper, that choice remains yours to make. Dawn found Sarah and Iron Eagle making their way back toward the trading post. Sarah's mind whirled with all she had learned from her grandmother's journal, techniques for communing with the spring, warnings about its power, and cryptic references to an ancient stone tablet hidden somewhere in the valley. My grandmother mentions a prophecy, Sarah said as they paused to rest, about a keeper of two worlds who would face a great test. Iron Eagle nodded. The tablet speaks of one with mixed blood who would either save the spring or witness its destruction. She believed it referred to her, Sarah continued, but then writes that perhaps it was meant for another time. For you? Iron Eagle said simply. They crested a ridge and stopped short. In the valley below, a military encampment had sprung up overnight, at least 20 soldiers, with more arriving. Supply wagons formed a perimeter around a cluster of tents, and at the center, Fletcher's distinctive white canvas shelter stood out against the desert landscape. They moved quickly, Iron Eagle murmured. As they watched, a familiar figure emerged from one of the military tents. Lieutenant Caldwell, deep in conversation with Fletcher. Though they were too distant to hear words, the lieutenant's body language suggested disagreement. We must reach your father, Iron Eagle said. He has influence with some of the white settlers. They circled widely around the encampment, using game trails and dry washes for cover. By midday, they approached the trading post from the east, careful to remain hidden until certain no soldiers were present. Thomas Blackwood rushed from the porch when he spotted them, relief and anger warring on his weathered face. 3 days with no word, he exclaimed, embracing Sarah before giving Iron Eagle a measuring look. The army's been by twice, asking questions. Inside, Sarah explained what had transpired, her ceremony at the spring, Fletcher's exploration, and the military encampment. Thomas listened silently, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When she finished, he went to a wooden chest in the corner of the room. From it, he removed a carefully wrapped bundle. Your grandmother left this, he said, placing it on the table between them. Said it was only to be opened if you followed her path to the spring. Sarah unwrapped the cloth to reveal a flat stone tablet, approximately the size of her hand, covered with symbols similar to those around the spring. Some matched the patterns she had traced with the ceremonial bow. She found it years ago, Thomas explained. Kept it hidden from the Apache, even from your grandfather. Said it was too dangerous in the wrong hands. Iron Eagle's eyes widened in recognition. The lost tablet of the first keeper, he breathed. My people have sought this for generations. He translated the ancient symbols, speaking slowly. When waters of power face the threat of metal and fire, only one who walks between worlds may preserve the balance. The keeper of mixed blood will either save the sacred waters or witness their passing from this world. The prophecy, Sarah whispered. Thomas studied his daughter's face. Elizabeth refused this burden, walked away from it to have a life with me. His voice roughened. I won't lose you to it, Sarah. You won't lose me, father. Sarah touched the silver pendant at her neck. But I can't walk away, not now. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Through the window, they saw Lieutenant Caldwell dismounting, alone, and without his uniform jacket, coming unofficially. Thomas opened the door before he could knock. Lieutenant, Caldwell removed his hat, Mr. Blackwood, Miss Blackwood. He nodded to Iron Eagle without surprise. I hoped I might find you here. What brings you, Lieutenant? Sarah asked carefully. Information you should have. Caldwell glanced over his shoulder as if concerned about being overheard. Fletcher has obtained authorization to establish mining operations in the high country. He's convinced my superiors that the water source contains minerals vital to national security. And does it? Thomas asked. The samples show unusual properties, Caldwell admitted. But Fletcher's interest isn't patriotic. He's already contacted Eastern investors about a private venture. When do they move? Iron Eagle asked. 3 days. They're awaiting specialized equipment. Caldwell hesitated. I've seen how the local Apache revere these mountains. There'll be bloodshed if Fletcher proceeds. Why tell us this? Sarah studied the young officer's face. Because there are right ways and wrong ways to progress, Caldwell replied, and destroying something sacred for profit falls firmly in the latter category. After Caldwell departed with a promise to delay Fletcher's plans where possible, Sarah, her father, and Iron Eagle gathered around the trading post table to strategize. We need to warn the Apache bands, Iron Eagle said. Many warriors would defend the sacred spring. Thomas shook his head. That's exactly what Fletcher wants, an excuse for the army to move against your people in force. Father's right, Sarah agreed. We need a solution that doesn't end in bloodshed. She opened her grandmother's journal again, searching for guidance. One entry caught her attention. The spring responds to intention. When threatened, it can defend itself if properly directed by the keeper. I need to return to the spring, Sarah decided. Tonight. Thomas looked ready to object, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he asked, What can I do to help? Speak with the settlers you trust, Sarah suggested. Many respect you. If they understood what Fletcher plans, not just disturbing sacred land, but potentially affecting the watershed for the entire region, they might oppose him. As Thomas prepared to leave, Iron Eagle suddenly tensed. Someone comes, he warned, moving to the window. Through the gathering dusk, they saw a lone rider approaching, one of Fletcher's surveyors, a man named Jenkins, whom Sarah recognized from previous visits. Thomas met him outside, while Sarah and Iron Eagle listened from within. Mr. Blackwood, Jenkins called, dismounting stiffly. Got something you should see. He handed Thomas a folded paper, which Thomas brought inside after Jenkins departed. It was a detailed map of the Sacred Valley and surrounding mountains, far more precise than any previous chart of the region. Fletcher's secret map, Iron Eagle said grimly, examining the document. The map showed not only the spring's location, but detailed notes on surrounding geology, water flow patterns, and potential mining sites. Most disturbing were the red X marks, indicating planned drill locations directly into the spring's source. How did Jenkins get this? Sarah wondered. Said Fletcher's been pushing too hard, Thomas explained. Some of the men are uneasy about disturbing Indian burial grounds. Iron Eagle studied the map carefully. Fletcher knows more than he should, he observed, pointing to notations about underwater caves and mineral deposits that would be impossible to detect from surface examination. This knowledge comes from someone who has been to the spring before. A cold realization struck Sarah. Someone betrayed the spring's secrets. She turned to Iron Eagle. Was there another guardian before you? Someone who might have turned against your people? Iron Eagle's expression darkened. My uncle was to be guardian after my father. He disappeared during the last conflict with the army. We believed him dead. Or captured, Thomas suggested. Men talk under duress. Or bribed, Sarah added quietly. As night fell, they finalized their plans. Thomas would ride at first light to speak with influential settlers. Iron Eagle would return to his people, not to summon warriors, but to gather the tribal elders who knew the spring's oldest secrets. Sarah would return to the spring immediately, under cover of darkness, to prepare its defenses as the new keeper. The silver pendant seemed to grow warmer against her skin as this decision was made. Before departing, Sarah embraced her father. "I'll be careful," she promised. "Your grandmother would be proud," Thomas said gruffly. "She always said you had the stronger spirit." Iron Eagle provided Sarah with a small leather pouch of sacred items, tobacco, cornmeal, and a special red ochre used in protective ceremonies. "The spring will guide you," he told her. "Listen with your blood and bones, not just your ears." They traveled separately to avoid drawing attention, Iron Eagle heading west toward his people's hidden camps, Sarah taking a more circuitous route toward the spring. The night was clear, stars providing just enough light to navigate the familiar trails. Near midnight, Sarah paused on a ridgeline overlooking Fletcher's camp. Most tents were dark, but lanterns still burned in Fletcher's larger tent. Through its canvas walls, she could make out silhouettes. Fletcher and another man bent over what appeared to be maps. Something about the second figure's posture struck her as familiar, though she couldn't place it. As she watched, the man emerged. From the tent, tall, with distinctive braided hair, Sarah's breath caught. Though older and dressed in white man's clothing, the features were unmistakable. Iron Eagle's missing uncle, not dead but very much alive, and working with Fletcher. The betrayal was worse than they had imagined. Sarah crept away from Fletcher's camp, mind racing with the implications of what she'd witnessed. Iron Eagle needed to know about his uncle's betrayal, but her first duty now was to the spring. She pushed deeper into the mountains, following paths that seemed increasingly familiar, as if the silver pendant at her neck guided her steps. The moon had passed its zenith when Sarah reached the hidden valley. Silence greeted her. No night birds, no rustling creatures. Even the wind had stilled, as if the land itself held its breath in anticipation. The spring glowed with subtle luminescence in the darkness, its surface mirror-smooth. Sarah approached, reverently, removing her boots before entering the circle of standing stones. Following her grandmother's journal instructions, she circled the spring 3 times clockwise, sprinkling pinches of the sacred cornmeal at each cardinal direction. "I come as keeper," she whispered to the waters. "Show me how to protect you." The spring's surface rippled in response, though no wind disturbed it. Sarah knelt at its edge and placed her hands upon the water. Instead of breaking the surface, her fingers met resistance, like touching smooth glass. Images flooded her mind, ancient peoples performing ceremonies around the spring. Her grandmother as a young woman communing with the waters, Iron Eagle's uncle drinking deeply, his expression twisted with ambition. The visions shifted to show underground chambers beneath the spring, a network of crystal-lined caverns where the true source of the waters bubbled up from deep within the earth. These caverns contained not just water, but crystalline formations that pulsed with energy, the source of the spring's power. When Sarah withdrew her hands, she found herself clutching something that hadn't been there before, a small crystal vessel, perfectly formed and cool to the touch despite having emerged from the water. Her grandmother's journal had mentioned such a vessel, used by keepers in times of greatest need to amplify the spring's power. Dawn approached as Sarah completed the protective rituals described in the journal. She sang the ancient songs Iron Eagle had taught her, tracing patterns in the air with the ceremonial bow. With each completed pattern, the standing stones seemed to pulse faintly, and the spring's glow intensified. As the first light touched the eastern ridges, Sarah heard sounds of approach, multiple people negotiating the narrow trail into the valley. She quickly concealed herself among the ancient dwellings, the crystal vessel and ceremonial bow hidden but ready. Fletcher entered first, followed by Iron Eagle's uncle, introduced to the work crew as Joseph, our guide. Behind them came 6 men carrying drilling equipment and wooden crates stamped with explosive warnings. "Set up there," Fletcher directed, pointing to the spring's edge. "We'll need samples from at least 30 feet down." "The stones will interfere," Joseph warned, indicating the ancient circle. Fletcher nodded. "Remove them if necessary. They're just old Indian markers." From her hiding place, Sarah felt a surge of protective rage. The pendant at her neck grew warm, and the spring's surface began to ripple despite the still morning air. "Sir," one worker called nervously, "the water's acting strange." Fletcher approached the spring, bending to examine the increasingly disturbed surface. "Some kind of underground pressure system. All the more reason to believe there's something valuable down there." He straightened, addressing his men. $10 extra for each of you if we're extracting samples by noon." As the workers began positioning their equipment, breaking the sanctity of the stone circle, Sarah felt the pendant grow hot against her skin. The ceremonial bow in her hands hummed with energy. Acting on instinct, she emerged from hiding, the crystal vessel held high. "Stop!" she commanded. "This spring is protected." Fletcher turned, momentarily startled, before recognition dawned. "Miss Blackwood, how unexpected." His surprise quickly gave way to calculation. "Come to assist our geological survey. You know that's not why I'm here." Sarah stepped forward, acutely aware of Joseph's narrowed eyes assessing the pendant and bow she carried. "This place is sacred to the Apache people. It's under my protection now." Fletcher's laugh held no humor. "Protection? My dear, I have 6 men, government authorization, and a military detachment just over that ridge. What exactly do you have?" As if in answer, the spring erupted behind him, a column of water rising 10 feet into the air before subsiding. The workers backed away, crossing themselves fearfully. "What I have," Sarah said steadily, "is the spring itself." Fletcher recovered quickly from his surprise, his expression hardening. "Parlor tricks won't stop progress, Miss Blackwood. This spring contains minerals vital to the nation's interests." "You mean vital to your investors' pockets?" Sarah countered. She kept her eyes on Fletcher, but remained acutely aware of Joseph edging around the perimeter of the spring. The workers stood uncertainly between them, tools half raised. "The army will be here within the hour," Fletcher warned. "Lieutenant Caldwell has orders to secure this site." "Then we don't have much time," came a familiar voice from the valley. Entrance. Thomas Blackwood stood there, rifle in hand but pointed downward. Behind him waited several local settlers Sarah recognized, ranchers and farmers who depended on the mountain watersheds. "These men have something to say about your mining operation," Thomas continued, stepping aside to let a grey-bearded rancher named McPherson step forward. "This spring feeds the watershed for 3 counties, McPherson stated flatly. You damage our livelihoods. The governor will hear about this." Fletcher's face flushed with anger. "This is federal land now, gentlemen. Your local concerns are irrelevant." While attention focused on this confrontation, Joseph had continued, his careful movement towards Sarah. She sensed rather than saw his approach, feeling the pendant grow warmer in warning. "The guardian's niece becomes keeper," Joseph said softly, close enough now that only she could hear. "My brother would be disappointed." "Your brother believed you dead," Sarah replied, matching his quiet tone. "He mourned you." Something flickered. In Joseph's eyes, regret perhaps quickly masked. "The old ways die, girl. Better to profit from their passing than perish with them." He lunged suddenly, grabbing for the ceremonial bow. Sarah twisted away, but Joseph's greater strength wrenched it from her grasp. The crystal vessel remained clutched in her left hand. "Fletcher!" Joseph called, holding the bow aloft. "This is what controls the water. Break it!" Fletcher signaled 2 workers to restrain Sarah while he approached to take the bow. Thomas raised his rifle, but the remaining workers drew pistols, creating a tense standoff. "Don't be a fool, Blackwood," Fletcher warned. "No one needs to get hurt here." As Fletcher reached for the bow, a new commotion erupted from the valley entrance. Iron Eagle appeared, leading a small group of Apache elders. Their arrival momentarily froze everyone in place. Enemies with weapons half raised, caught in a moment of suspended action. Iron Eagle locked eyes with his uncle, comprehension and betrayal darkening his features. "Brother of my father," he said in Apache, "you desecrate what you once protected." Joseph responded in the same language, his words incomprehensible to Sarah, though their bitterness needed no translation. Fletcher broke the moment. "Enough! Secure the Indians. We're proceeding as planned." He turned the ceremonial bow in his hands, examining it with calculating eyes. As the workers moved to obey, Sarah felt the crystal vessel pulse in her palm. Acting on instinct, she knelt and pressed it against the earth at the spring's edge. The ground beneath her vibrated in response. "Iron Eagle," she called. "The vessel!" Understanding flashed across his face. In fluid Apache, he instructed the elders, who began to chant, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. The spring's waters churned violently. The standing stones began to hum, their vibrations disturbing the loose soil around them. One of Fletcher's men stumbled back as the ground shifted beneath his feet. Sarah felt power surging through her connection to the vessel and the earth. She pressed her free hand into the soil, fingers digging into the ground. Clay mixed with her skin, earth combining with her blood. "What's happening?" Fletcher demanded, looking around wildly. A small tremors shook the valley. Joseph's face paled. "She's calling the mountain," he said. "Break the vessel." Fletcher raised the ceremonial bow, attempting to snap it across his knee. The ancient wood resisted, bending but not breaking. In frustration, he threw it toward the spring. Instead of sinking, the bow floated on the turbulent surface, spinning slowly until it pointed directly at Sarah. The waters calmed in an expanding circle around it while continuing to churn violently elsewhere. Sarah understood. Rising to her feet, mud-streaked hands still clutching the crystal vessel, she stepped into the spring. The waters parted around her legs, creating a dry path to where the bow floated. "Stop her!" Fletcher shouted, but his men hesitated, unnerved by what they were witnessing. Thomas used the distraction to move closer to his daughter, rifle ready to defend her if needed. The Apache elders continued their chant, which now seemed to come from the stones themselves. Sarah reached the floating bow, water swirling impossibly around her without touching her clothing. As her fingers closed around the ancient wood, the spring's surface smoothed like glass, reflecting the morning sky in perfect stillness. "Enough." "Theatrics," Fletcher snapped, though his voice carried an edge of uncertainty. He pulled a revolver from his coat and aimed it at Thomas. "Control your daughter, Blackwood, or suffer the consequences." Before Thomas could respond, hoofbeats echoed through the valley. Lieutenant Caldwell appeared with a small detachment of soldiers, their expressions shifting from military discipline to stunned disbelief as they took in the scene. Settlers and Apache facing off against Fletcher's men, with Sarah standing in the midst of a spring that defied natural law. "Lieutenant," Fletcher called, recovering quickly, "arrest these people for interfering with a government operation." Caldwell dismounted slowly, his eyes never leaving Sarah and the phenomenon surrounding her. "What government operation would that be, Mr. Fletcher? The one you described to Colonel Roberts? Or the private mining venture you've been organizing with your Eastern investors?" Fletcher's face darkened. "You're overstepping, Lieutenant." "No, sir. I believe you are." Caldwell produced an official-looking document. "This morning I received orders directly from Fort Whipple. All operations in this region are suspended pending investigation of certain financial irregularities brought to the governor's attention." Fletcher reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a gold compass, an expensive instrument that had become his constant companion. He flipped it open, seemingly to check their position, but instead extracted a folded paper hidden inside the case. "Perhaps this will clarify matters," he said, extending the document toward Caldwell. "Special authorization from the Secretary of the Interior himself." As Caldwell reached for the paper, the compass in Fletcher's hand began to spin wildly, its needle whirling in impossible directions. Fletcher stared at it in confusion, shaking the instrument as if to correct a malfunction. Sarah felt the power flowing through her, from the earth, through the vessel into the bow, and back to the spring in a continuous circuit. The water responded to her thoughts, to her will. She understood now what her grandmother's journal had meant about the spring defending itself when properly directed. "This place rejects your presence," she called to Fletcher, her voice carrying an authority that surprised even her. "It will not be desecrated." Joseph stepped forward, addressing Iron Eagle and the elders in rapid Apache. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but Iron Eagle's expression shifted from anger to grave concern. "What is he saying?" she asked. "He speaks of the deep caves," Iron Eagle replied. "Says Fletcher's men have already placed explosives at the spring's true source. They plan to divert the water to a new location they control." Fletcher smiled thinly. "Insurance, Miss Blackwood. Those charges will detonate at noon with or without us, unless, of course, we reach an accommodation." "What accommodation?" Thomas demanded. "Simple. The spring clearly has unusual properties with value." Fletcher's eyes gleamed with calculation. "Your daughter has some connection to it. I propose a partnership. The Apache keep their sacred site, you and your daughter receive a generous percentage, and my company develops the resource." "Develop it how?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "The water's mineral content has remarkable properties. Eastern pharmaceutical companies would pay fortunes for it." Fletcher spread his hands. "Everyone profits, except the spring dies," Sarah replied. "Bottled and sold until nothing remains." "Progress requires sacrifice," Fletcher said dismissively. "You have 30 minutes to decide before my men trigger those charges." Sarah looked to Iron Eagle, whose face remained impassive though his eyes burned with quiet rage. "Can we reach the deep caves in time?" "The only entrance lies beneath the spring itself," he answered, "and only a true keeper can find the way." Sarah closed her eyes, focusing on her connection to the water. The silver pendant pulsed against her skin in time. With her heartbeat, images flowed into her mind, a hidden passage behind the ancient dwellings, a steep descent into darkness, crystalline chambers glowing with their own light. When she opened her eyes again, her decision was made. "I need to reach the source." "Impossible," Joseph interjected. "The passage takes hours to navigate." "For you, perhaps," Iron Eagle said to his uncle. "But she is keeper now. The mountain will open for her." Fletcher checked his pocket watch impatiently. 25 minutes, Miss Blackwood. Choose wisely." Sarah stepped from the spring, water falling away from her still dry clothing. The ceremonial, a bow in one hand, crystal vessel in the other, she turned to her father. "Trust me," she said softly. Thomas nodded, his weathered face showing both fear and pride. "Always have." Sarah moved toward the ancient dwellings, feeling the spring's guidance pulling her to a specific wall covered with faded pictographs. Iron Eagle followed, leaving the elders to continue their protective chants. "I'm coming with you," he said, simply. Behind them, Caldwell positioned his men between Fletcher's workers and the spring, while Thomas and the settlers formed a second line of defense. The lieutenant caught Sarah's eye briefly, nodding his support. Fletcher watched with narrowed eyes, his malfunctioning compass still spinning wildly in his palm. 20 minutes, he called after them. "Then everyone here pays the price." At the ancient dwelling's rear wall, Sarah placed her palm against a faded spiral pictograph. The silver pendant grew warm, and beneath her hand the stone seemed to soften like clay. Lines of blue light spread from her fingers, tracing the spiral pattern until the entire section glowed. "Step back," Iron Eagle warned, pulling her away as the stone wall shimmered and parted, revealing a narrow passage that hadn't existed moments before. Cool air rushed out, carrying the scent of mineral-rich earth and something else, an electric quality that made the hairs on Sarah's arms rise. Within the passage, crystalline formations embedded in the walls provided soft illumination. "The mountain opens for you," Iron Eagle whispered, awe evident in his voice. They entered the passage, which immediately began to descend at a steep angle. What should have been a treacherous climb became strangely manageable. Handholds appeared where needed. Narrow ledges widened as they stepped upon them. The mountain itself seemed to accommodate their passage. Joseph said this journey takes hours, Sarah noted as they moved deeper at an impossible pace. For those not chosen by the spring, yes. Iron Eagle ducked beneath a low overhang. The mountain reshapes itself for the true keeper. The passage eventually opened into a vast underground chamber. Towering crystal formations rose from floor to ceiling, glowing with soft blue-green light. In the chamber's center stood a weathered stone statue, a female figure with arms outstretched, water flowing from her palms into a basin below. The Spring Guardian, Iron Eagle explained reverently, carved by the ancient ones who first discovered this place. Sarah approached the statue, drawn by an inexplicable connection. As she neared, the figure's features shifted subtly, for a moment resembling her grandmother, then changing to reflect Sarah's own face. "It recognizes you," Iron Eagle observed. From the basin at the statue's feet, water flowed into channels cut through the crystal floor, eventually disappearing into a smaller passage. Following this stream, they entered a second chamber, where the spring's true source became visible, a deep pool fed by countless tiny rivulets emerging from the surrounding rock. Black metal cylinders had been positioned around the pool's edge. Fletchers, explosives, enough to collapse the entire chamber and redirect the spring's flow. A simple clock mechanism sat beside them, ticking steadily toward noon. "We have less than 10 minutes, Iron Eagle said grimly. Sarah knelt beside the nearest explosive. "Can we disarm them?" "Not safely, and not in time." Iron Eagle examined the wiring connecting the devices. "They're designed to trigger simultaneously." Sarah clutched the ceremonial bow, trying to think. Her grandmother's journal had described the spring's defensive capabilities, but nothing about protecting against modern explosives. The crystal vessel in her hand pulsed suddenly, drawing her attention to the water. Acting on instinct, she dipped the vessel into the source pool. The water that filled it glowed with intense blue light. "The purest water," Iron Eagle murmured, "the spring's lifeblood." Sarah raised the vessel, studying its contents. Within the glowing liquid, she could see miniature reflections of the chamber, the explosives, herself, and Iron Eagle, as if the water contained a perfect model of their surroundings. Understanding dawned. Carefully, she poured a single drop of the glowing water onto the nearest explosive. The black metal cylinder shimmered briefly, then began to transform, its industrial form softening, reshaping into crystalline structures that matched the surrounding chamber. "The spring reclaims what doesn't belong," Sarah whispered. She moved quickly, applying drops to each explosive. One by one, they transformed from instruments of destruction into natural formations indistinguishable from the chamber's crystal growths. The timing mechanism was the last to change, its metallic components flowing like wax into organic patterns of stone and crystal. Above them, they could hear distant shouting, Fletcher's deadline approaching. Iron Eagle touched Sarah's arm. "We should return. The others remain in danger." As they turned to leave, a shadow moved at the chamber entrance. Joseph stepped into view, a mining pick gripped in his hands. "The old fools were right," he said, his voice echoing in the crystal chamber. "The spring did choose a true keeper." His gaze moved from Sarah to the transformed explosives. "Fletcher will not be pleased. You betrayed your people," Iron Eagle said, positioning himself between Joseph and Sarah. "Betrayed our father's trust. I showed Fletcher the way because the old world is dying," Joseph replied. "Better to control how it ends than perish uselessly defending it." "The spring isn't dying," Sarah countered, "and neither are the old ways." As if responding to her words, the statue in the previous chamber began to emit a deep humming sound. The stone floor beneath their feet vibrated in resonance. Joseph's eyes widened. "What have you done?" Before Sarah could answer, the crystal formations throughout the chamber began to pulse with intensifying light. The spring guardian statue in the adjoining room started to move, stone fingers flexing, head turning toward the chamber entrance. "The mountain awakens," Iron Eagle breathed. The statue stepped from its base with a sound like grinding stone, water still flowing from its outstretched palms. As it moved toward them, its features continued to shift, cycling through faces of past keepers. Joseph backed away, terror replacing his earlier confidence. "This isn't possible." "Return to the surface," Sarah told Iron Eagle. "Tell them what's happened here." "I won't leave you," he protested. "The spring will protect me," Sarah assured him, the pendant at her neck glowing brightly now. "But my father needs to know I'm safe." After a moment's hesitation, Iron Eagle nodded and departed, casting one last troubled glance at his uncle before disappearing up the passage. Joseph stood transfixed as the stone guardian approached, its blank eyes now fixed upon him. "What will it do to me?" he whispered. Sarah met his frightened gaze. "That depends on what the spring finds in your heart." On the surface, tension had reached its breaking point. Fletcher paced anxiously, checking his watch every few seconds as the deadline approached. Thomas and the settlers stood their ground, rifles ready but not raised. Lieutenant Caldwell positioned, his soldiers between the opposing groups, maintaining an uneasy peace. "Time's up," Fletcher announced, his expression triumphant. "Your daughter has failed, Blackwood. The charges should be detonating right about—" The ground trembled beneath their feet, but not with the violence of explosions. Instead, a rhythmic vibration pulsed through the valley as if the mountain itself had begun to breathe. The spring's waters rose and fell in perfect synchrony with the tremors. Iron Eagle emerged from the ancient dwelling, his normally stoic expression replaced by one of wonder. "The Guardian awakens," he announced. "The Keeper has saved the source." "Impossible," Fletcher snapped. "Those charges were military grade." "The spring has reclaimed them," Iron Eagle replied, "as it will reclaim everything that threatens it." The vibrations intensified. Around the spring's perimeter, the standing stones began to glow with the same blue-green light visible in the underground chambers. One by one, they shifted position slightly, angling inward toward the water. "Sarah," Thomas called anxiously. "Where is my daughter?" "She remains below with the Guardian," Iron Eagle explained. "She sent me to tell you she is safe." Fletcher's face contorted with rage. "This is some kind of trick." He turned to his men. "Get the backup charges from the wagon. We'll finish this now." As his workers moved to obey, the spring erupted, a column of water shooting 20 feet into the air before arcing over to block their path. The liquid held its impossible shape, forming a barrier between Fletcher's men and their equipment. "This has gone far enough," Caldwell declared, stepping forward. "Mr. Fletcher, you're under arrest for attempting to illegally appropriate federal land and endangering civilian lives." Fletcher drew his revolver. "I've invested too much to walk away now." Before he could fire, the ground split beneath his feet. He stumbled backward as a fissure opened, widening until it formed a perfect circle around him. Within this boundary, the earth softened and began to sink, creating a shallow depression that trapped him in place. From the entrance to the ancient dwelling, a new figure emerged, not Sarah, but Joseph. His expression was transformed, haunted, yet somehow at peace. He carried 2 arrows in his hands, one dark and worn, the other pale and new, both marked with symbols of the Guardians. "The spring has shown me truth," he said, his voice carrying easily despite its softness. "It offers one chance for redemption." He approached Fletcher, who struggled futilely in his earthen trap. "The Guardian judges us all by what lies in our hearts," Joseph continued. "It found darkness in mine, but also the possibility of light." He held out the arrows. "Choose, Fletcher. Surrender to the spring's judgment, or face the consequences of defying it." Fletcher stared at the arrows with incomprehension. "This is madness. There are no magical springs, no stone guardians, just valuable resources and superstitious natives." The ground beneath him sank another inch. "Choose," Joseph repeated. With a curse, Fletcher snatched the darker arrow and snapped it in half. "There's your answer." The effect was immediate. The broken arrow dissolved into dust that swirled around Fletcher, clinging to his clothing and skin. Where it touched, his fine suit began to transform, hardening into a substance that resembled the stone of the valley. "What's happening?" Fletcher cried, panic replacing arrogance as the transformation spread rapidly across his body. "You've made your choice," Joseph said simply. The standing stones flared with blinding light. When it faded, Fletcher was gone. In his place stood a rough stone formation the same height and width as a man, its surface traced with patterns reminiscent of water flowing over rock. A hush fell over the valley. Even Fletcher's men stood transfixed, unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. Caldwell crossed himself reflexively, while Thomas and the settlers lowered their weapons in stunned silence. The ground trembled once more, and from the ancient dwelling, Sarah finally emerged. She looked somehow changed, her movements more fluid, her eyes reflecting the same blue-green light as the spring. In her hands, she carried the ceremonial bow and the unbroken second arrow Joseph had offered. "The Guardian has returned to its watch," she announced, her voice carrying an authority beyond her years. "The spring is safe." She approached the circle of standing stones, where the water had returned to its usual tranquility. Raising the bow, she nocked the pale arrow and drew the string. Instead of releasing it toward any target, she held the position as the arrow began to glow with increasing brightness. Iron Eagle moved to stand opposite her across the spring, raising his hands in a ceremonial gesture. The Apache elders joined him, forming a circle around the water. The twin arrows represent division and unity. Iron Eagle explained to the bewildered onlookers. "One path leads to destruction, the other to balance." Sarah released the glowing arrow straight upward. It soared high above the valley before bursting into a shower of light that rained down upon the spring. Where these luminous droplets touched the water, ripples spread outward in perfect concentric circles. "The cycle is complete," Sarah announced. "The spring has chosen its defenders and removed those who would harm it." As if to confirm her words, the stone formation that had been Fletcher began to sink slowly into the earth, returning to the mountain from which its materials had come. In the days that followed, the valley underwent a transformation more subtle, but no less profound than Fletcher's. The military detachment withdrew under Lieutenant Caldwell's command, taking Fletcher's bewildered workers with them. The men spoke, in hushed tones of what they'd witnessed. Though few would believe their tales in the settlements below, Thomas Blackwood remained with his daughter, watching with quiet pride as Sarah assumed her role as keeper. The settlers who had stood with him returned to their homes with a new understanding of the mountain's importance and a commitment to protect the watersheds that sustained them all. A week after the confrontation, Lieutenant Caldwell returned. Alone, carrying an official-looking document sealed with government ribbons. "The governor was most interested in my report," he explained, presenting the paper to Sarah. "This declares the entire valley and surrounding ridges a protected reservation under joint stewardship of the local Apache bands and—" He paused, smiling slightly, "the designated keeper of the spring." Sarah accepted the treaty with appropriate gravity. "And your superiors believed your account?" "I may have emphasized the watershed's importance to territorial agriculture rather than certain, unexplainable events," Caldwell admitted. "But the result is the same. This land is protected now, by law as well as by other forces." Iron Eagle examined the document with cautious optimism. Since the confrontation, he had remained close to the spring, helping Sarah master her new responsibilities while rebuilding trust with his uncle. Joseph had accepted a role as elder storyteller, using his experiences to warn younger Apache about the dangers of abandoning traditional ways. "Words on paper have been broken before," Iron Eagle noted. "Not these," Caldwell assured him. "Too many influential settlers have taken interest. McPherson and the others have formed a committee to ensure the agreement is honored." That evening, a small ceremony took place beside the spring. Apache elders gathered alongside Thomas, Caldwell, and representatives from nearby settlements. Sarah stood at the center, her silver pendant gleaming in the firelight, the ceremonial bow in her hands. "Today we recognize what has always been true," she began, her voice carrying easily across the assembled group. "This land, this water, belongs to no one person or people. We are its stewards, not its owners." The treaty was passed from hand to hand, each participant adding their mark, signatures from the settlers, thumbprints from Apache elders who did not write in the white man's way. When it returned to Sarah, she added her own signature before passing it to Iron Eagle, who marked it with the Guardian's symbol. "With these marks, we pledge to protect the waters that sustain us all," Sarah continued, "to honor the spring and the mountain that cradles it." As twilight deepened, the Apache began a healing ceremony, songs of reconciliation and renewal that echoed through the valley. Sarah joined their circle, moving with the practiced steps Iron Eagle had taught her. Thomas watched from nearby, his weathered face reflecting both loss and acceptance as his daughter moved between worlds. Later, when most had departed to camp for the night, Sarah found her father sitting alone by the spring's edge. "You remind me so much of her," he said without turning. "Your grandmother had that same certainty when she moved between worlds." Sarah settled beside him. "Yet she chose to leave this place." "She chose a different path," Thomas corrected gently. "Not because the spring rejected her, but because she saw another way to bridge worlds. Through you." He took her hand, studying the changes few others would notice. The faint luminescence beneath her skin when twilight fell, the slightly altered rhythm of her breathing that matched the spring's pulse. "Will you stay here now?" he asked, the question that had lingered between them. Sarah squeezed his hand. "Not entirely. The spring doesn't need constant attendance, just regular ceremonies and protection." She touched the silver pendant at her neck. "I can feel it even at a distance now. I'll know if it's threatened." Relief softened Thomas's features. "The trading post would be mighty empty without you." "Besides," Sarah added with a smile, "someone needs to keep an eye on Lieutenant Caldwell. I don't trust the army to remember this treaty without regular reminding." Thomas chuckled. "I think the lieutenant might welcome such reminders, particularly from the Keeper of the Spring." Sarah's cheeks colored slightly. She had noticed Caldwell's respectful glances, his careful attention when she spoke. Unlike Fletcher, his interest seemed untainted by greed or calculation, a genuine appreciation for who and what she was becoming. Iron Eagle approached, ceremonial bow in hand. The elders wished to complete the final blessing before departing. Sarah nodded and rose. This ceremony would officially recognize her dual role, keeper of the spring to the Apache, liaison to the white world through her position at the trading post. A true bridge between worlds, as her grandmother had intended. As she followed Iron Eagle toward the waiting elders, Sarah felt the spring's energy flowing through her, not possessing or controlling, but partnering. The silver pendant hummed against her skin, a constant reminder of the balance she now helped maintain. Behind her, the spring's surface reflected stars appearing in the darkening sky, countless points of light mirrored in water that would flow under her protection for generations to come. 1 year later, Sarah stood on the trading post porch, watching riders approach through the golden light of late afternoon. The silver pendant at her neck, now rarely removed, warmed slightly in recognition before she could consciously identify the visitors. "Iron Eagle brings company," she called to her father inside. Thomas emerged, wiping his hands on his apron. In the year since the confrontation at the spring, he had gradually ceded more of the trading post's operations to Sarah, focusing instead on crafting furniture from local woods, a talent long suppressed by necessity that now flourished in his semi-retirement. "Apache or settlers?" he asked, shading his eyes. "Both," Sarah replied with a smile. Iron Eagle rode at the head of the small procession, his usually stern features relaxed. Behind him came 3 Apache families with children, and bringing up the rear, Lieutenant Caldwell, recently promoted to captain, accompanied by 2 young soldiers carrying surveying equipment. The past year had established a new rhythm to Sarah's life. 2 weeks of each month were spent at the trading post, maintaining the family business and serving as liaison between the territorial government and the Apache bands. The remaining time she dedicated to her duties as keeper, living in one of the ancient dwellings beside the spring, learning its deepest secrets while conducting ceremonies to maintain the balance between worlds. Iron Eagle had become her teacher and partner in protecting the sacred waters. Their relationship had evolved into one of profound respect and trust, transcending cultural boundaries. Together, they had begun training selected young people from both communities in the Springs lore, creating a new generation of guardians to ensure its continued protection. "The children come for their first blessing," Iron Eagle explained after dismounting, "and to meet the keeper of whom they have heard many stories." Sarah welcomed the families warmly, speaking the Apache phrases she had mastered over the months. The children regarded her with wide-eyed curiosity, particularly when the pendant at her neck began to glow softly in the fading light. Captain Caldwell approached last, removing his hat with the same respect he'd shown since witnessing the spring's power. His visits to the trading post had grown more frequent, often coinciding with Sarah's time there, a pattern too consistent to be mere coincidence. "Miss Blackwood," he greeted her, "I've brought the final boundary markers for the reservation. Thought you might want to verify their placement personally." "I would indeed, Captain," Sarah replied. His devotion to honoring the treaty had proven unwavering, earning him the cautious acceptance of even the most skeptical Apache elders. Thomas invited everyone to stay for the evening meal, a regular gathering that had once been unimaginable, but now strengthened the bonds between communities. As Sarah helped prepare food, she caught sight of a special bundle Iron Eagle had placed carefully on a nearby shelf. The combined medicine bundle, her grandmother's leather pouch now interwoven with traditional Apache materials, represented the bridge Sarah had become. Inside rested items of power from both cultures, her grandmother's herbs alongside ceremonial objects from the spring, pioneer remedies beside Apache medicines. That night, after their guests had settled around campfires outside the trading post, Sarah sat with Iron Eagle and her father on the porch. Captain Caldwell joined them by invitation, his presence now a comfortable addition to their inner circle. "The spring showed me something new yesterday," Sarah said, breaking a companionable silence. "A vision of children, not just learning about the waters, but understanding them as we do." Iron Eagle nodded thoughtfully. The Guardian spoke of this, the spring's knowledge spreading not through conquest, but through sharing. "My grandmother's greatest hope," Thomas added. "That wisdom would find a way to survive the changes she saw coming." Sarah touched the pendant, which pulsed gently in response. "Next month I'll begin teaching McPherson's granddaughter and 2 children from Blue Hawk's band. They've shown the sensitivity needed to perceive the spring's voice." Caldwell leaned forward. "The territorial governor is considering a permanent protection act based on our success here. Other sacred sites might be preserved using this model." The conversation continued as stars appeared above, each participant contributing to a vision that extended far beyond their lifetimes. Sarah listened, occasionally adding her perspective, but also absorbing the profound reality of what they had accomplished together. Later, standing alone at the porch railing after the others had retired, Sarah felt a familiar presence in her mind, the spring reaching out across distance, its consciousness touching hers in gentle communion. In that silent exchange lay everything that mattered: connection to the land, to her heritage, and to the diverse community that had formed around a shared commitment to something greater than themselves. The broken arrow that had first brought her and Iron Eagle together had led to this, healing not just between individuals, but between peoples. As keeper of mountain spirits and daughter of the frontier, Sarah Blackwood stood firmly planted in both worlds, drawing strength from each, belonging to both, yet ultimately guided by the spring's ancient wisdom, that all waters, like all peoples, flow from the same source and return to it in time.